Hello, hello, hello. This is Misty Magdalena Grace with the new and improved version of Healthy and Wealthy and Wise, where we talk about spirituality, psychedelics, plant medicine, microdosing, and really that journey within to finding your best innate wisdom, to your best health, your best wealth through all sorts of inner child healing, trauma release, grief recovery, overcoming addictions, and working with the mind, the body, and spirit. So go ahead, leave a review, subscribe, download. We look forward to your feedback. Thanks for tuning in today. Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome back. Oh my gosh, here we are, the end of summer. Kids are back in school for most of us anyway, and I'm back. I've taken a bit of a reprieve and getting ready for a big month in September, and I thought, what a great way to tee up September by having my guest, Dr. Karen Kramer, here to discuss the topic of grief. I just wanted to make a few quick announcements, housekeeping items, especially if you're watching this for the first time. I am a healer of healing grief and addiction and a variety of things, and really passionate about the topic of grief. So we're going to be talking a lot about that today, and just would really encourage you, if this touches your heart, to share it with someone that you care about that may be going through a tough time. We'll be defining what grief is and all of that kind of stuff. And if this is your first time and you're on my YouTube channel, please subscribe, like, comment, tell us what did you like best about this show. I do see we have some eyeballs out there. If you are on the live and you want to comment below right now, #live. City, state, country, wherever you're tuning in from. And if you're on the replay, I'm right now streaming live on LinkedIn and YouTube land. So just want to acknowledge my friends out there. You can also comment below on the replay, #replay. We'd love to know who's watching us. And if you enjoyed the show, please share it. So Dr. Karen, I know you and I can't even remember how we met anymore. I think I got an email from you somehow, and it was about grief. And since I'm so passionate about it, and grief is something that has impacted my life in so many facets, that, here we are today having you on this show. And so I'll share a little bit about you, but then I'd love for you to take it away and share a little bit of your story. So Dr. Karen Kramer is a guiding light who has transformed the lives of hundreds of thousands of individuals around the globe since the early 90s. Okay, so let that soak in, guys. She's been doing this for a minute, since the 90s, and she has a profound understanding of the human mind, and she's a grief recovery expert. So she's a mindset coach, a speaker, author. I think we'll talk a little bit about her book today as well. And so Dr. Karen, thank you so much for being here today.
You.
Awesome. Well, I'd love for you to tell us, how did you become a grief recovery expert?
Yes, well, some of this background too, and you mentioned it, being in the world of leadership development and executive coaching for over 30 years, that was the background. But I realized many of the individuals I was working with had events that happened throughout their life that really shape who we are. And I know the two of us have events, major events that have happened throughout our life that have led us to where we are, right? And also with some of those individuals, it really propelled them, and others, it really held them back. So I'll briefly tell my story about how I ended up in this area. And really, it is a story that started at the time of this recording about 12 years ago. So I had one of those days, which, by the way, this is not my norm, but I had one of those days where I just freaking lost it. I was yelling and screaming at my lovely husband and my kids. I was cussing out my brothers. I was hanging up on my mom. I had just lost it. And I stepped back and I looked at the aftermath, and all, like, my kids were like tiptoeing around me. My husband's like, okay, I'm not quite sure what's going on. And I realized, okay, I needed to do something about this. So I did what I thought would be best, and I went to see a therapist. Now, mind you, as I continue my story, love our wonderful therapists as well as medical professionals, because they're there to help us. And as you and I know, there are various different ways to help people through challenging times in their life. So let me step back into my story. I went to the therapist, who I think also was new at the time, and looked at my background and my experience. And I could just tell by the way she was interacting with me that she wasn't quite sure how to respond. So let's take that into consideration. I walked out of that 45-minute session being diagnosed with situational anxiety. Now, I haven't told you yet what led up to it, but I looked at that and I went, okay, I'm not even quite sure what situational anxiety is. She also sent me off to anxiety group therapy, which I don't even remember anything about it. So then about a month later, I had another interaction with my young son at that point in time, and who was about 9, and screamed at him. And again, in this moment was not my norm, but I realized it was related. And so I went thinking at that point in time, I'm in my early 40s, I went to see my doctor. So doctor thinking, well, am I going through menopause? Like, why am I having all these emotions? And within 2 minutes, she cut me off when I shared what was going on and prescribed me drugs. I'm not the one who takes anything other than over-the-counter medications. So when I say drugs, I mean, in this case, some medication for what was going on in my life after 2 minutes. I refused that, went to a destination spa, 7 days, loved it. It was wonderful. But after 2 hours of being back, I was bickering with my loving husband again. Now, all this to say, what was happening on that day? I had just put my beloved 18-year-old cat to sleep. For those of us who have experienced that challenging, heart-wrenching experience about having to make a decision about a pet's life. However, I was just starting the grief process because a month before that, my 90-year-old beloved father had just passed away, and I had not processed the grief. So here I was a month later, putting my cat to sleep. Something else happened between my mom, and it sparked all this emotion. And I realized in the middle of this that I was going through grief, but the well-meaning family, friends, even professionals who were there to support me were not acknowledging and bringing forward the fact that I really was going through this grief process. So I have then moved forward then, and with here 2.5 years ago, back to back, brother passing away, mom then passing away at the young age of 97 and a half. And I realized as I was going through that process why it was so much different, that I was able to more healthfully process through that, because I actually was utilizing the same skills for myself that I was for my clients as they were going through their own grief process. And that's what then sparked the book, Healthy Grief, was another way to actually get that information out there. What is grief? It's much more than death and dying. And what's a healthy process to be able to process through that?
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for all of that. I can relate. My audience knows, and I had shared with you, part of why I wanted you now is because Sunday is September 1st and Suicide Awareness Month and Addiction Recovery Month. I lost 12 friends to suicide, a lot of people to, addiction, and I never knew the grief recovery existed. And I even had a therapist fire me because I don't think they could help me. So I've also been there. So everything you were saying, I just want to acknowledge and say thank you for, shouldering that, moving through that, finding the grace, the wisdom, and the tools. And I feel like it's a really important thing now, because I think a lot of people are still grieving the pandemic. There's a lot of people still grieving a lot of changes in the world and things that are beyond our control. So I know that grief a lot of times gets associated with death, and you did mention that, as I just did as well, but maybe define again what layers or different types of grief there are.
Yes, I define grief as a significant event that leads to a significant sorrow or deep emotions when what once was is no longer. So emphasizing that, when what once was is no longer. Now that could be anything. Again, we typically associate that with death and dying, but it can be associated with things such as intimate relationships, breakups and divorce. It could be family estrangements. And these are some of the clients that I have as well. So family estrangements where, for example, a grandmother is not able to see her grandchildren because of a falling out with her children or in-laws, or to retirement. I had a client who, retirement, you're supposed to be all happy and cheerful when you go into retirement. And she went into a state of depression because she didn't have the structure. Even becoming an empty nester. Those who are hitting a certain milestone in their age when they have a certain belief or something about that age, or an ailment, so a health issue that's coming up, or even the loss of hopes and dreams. So grief can be anything that where something once was that we had a belief in or was true for us, and then all of a sudden it's no longer, like turning the page of a chapter in your proverbial book of life, and all of a sudden you don't have that relationship or that person or that job or that belief anymore, and all of a sudden something's new and you're having a significant response to that. That is grief. So part of healthy grief is opening it up to recognize that, yes, grief is much more than death and dying. And these experiences, these feelings that you may be having are okay. They're part of this process. Then the goal is, how do you grieve healthfully through that process? And that is a big underpinning of why it is named healthy grief.
Yeah, I can't wait. I got to get your book just because I'm so intrigued now. So I'd love for you to tell us, maybe, I don't know, pick your top 3 favorite ways in working with clients or even your own self that you discovered are like foundational to healthy grief.
Good. So in backing into those 3, I will mention this. The book really started with my client experiences as well as some of my own. So there are 30 grief survivor case studies which are in the book, 30 grief survivor case studies. And all of those are then split up into the 7 different categories, many of those which I just named, death and dying, intimate relationships, other relationships, etc. So in there, the reason why I have those in there and the reason why they are case studies, starting with my own clients and my own stories and expanded from there, is to give the readers an opportunity. You may connect with the story. You may connect with the person who wrote the story. But bottom line is, each of those case studies, those stories, are then I do a review of them based upon the 5-step framework, the healthy grief framework that I have in the book. So that, and it's really laying the foundation. It's almost like stepping stones, as I call it, is we have this unique path through grief. There's not one path. Now there's many that are out there, like Kubler-Ross's, the 5 stages, and there's other stages of grief that are out there. This is less about what's the stage, and I specifically call it a framework, so you can create your own stepping stone, your unique path through grief. So whether it's from the framework, whether it's from the stories, they overlap. So for example, getting back to the 3 steps you're talking about, is I look at the framework in any way where you can also help individuals through it. So what are you thinking, your head? What are you feeling, your heart? What are some action steps, your feet, that you can take? What support do you need, your hands? And what's your future vision? Now it follows along the GRIEF framework that goes into that, but it's a way to think about. For example, when we think about today, and you mentioned COVID. COVID's a perfect example. I had some clients during COVID, and when they couldn't think about what the future was, like, where do you see yourself in a month or a year? They couldn't. So then one tip was, what does it look like by the end of today? Or if that was still challenging, by the end of the hour, what does it look like for you? For example, it could be getting out of bed by noon, taking a shower, putting on new clothes. So recognizing that what that future vision looks like is, if it's too far out, it's step it back to a point where, at least in the moment, you can feel comfortable about what that future vision looks like, even if it's in the next hour. for you. So that's one quick step to think about there. I can go on for others, but I just wanted to give that framework right there about future vision. It's going to change, and just what's going to take you to that next step. And again, it could just be within the next hour. I don't hear you. Did you turn off the?
Sorry about that. I muted myself just because, just to be safe. Thank you. It's really cool that you're mentioning that, because that's actually we're going to have 3 guest speakers at my September 21st Suicide Awareness Month. And yeah, if you don't have hope in a future and something to like pull your heartstrings forward, it's so easy to just get stuck, stagnant, and become complacent. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. And you mentioned hope too, which is part of a framework, an emotion framework that I've used in the executive world. There's 2 different frameworks that I brought in. So I'll briefly talk about that, because the last one actually ends in hope. And this framework, so let me step back here. When I was researching individuals for the book, because I wanted to make sure they were healthily enough through the process, I was a lot of feedback around 3 words on how they felt. And these 3 words were overwhelmed, lost, and alone. Feeling overwhelmed. I don't even know what's going on right now. Like, I just had this event. I'm so overwhelmed by it. Lost, like, I don't even know who I am anymore, let alone what I want in this life. And also alone, just this sort of isolation that I'm the only one who feels this way, whether they physically isolate themselves or just feel isolated. So overwhelmed, lost, and alone. So with that, I brought in the Dancing with Sarah model. Dancing with Sarah, which is a model I use with executives. I've used it with teenagers. I've used it with my clients. So it is just recognizing the various different emotions that we might feel. And usually I do this on a flip chart. And it is, so flip chart being a U shape, and it's with Sarah with an H at the end. So SARAH, and thinking about the emotional flows that we have. And when I usually start off by thinking about what does S stand for, and the intention. And actually in the book, I use some of that work. So I actually have, I don't remember how many different emotions associated with those words and expanded. But it's the idea of when you're lost or overwhelmed, that you kind of have an idea about, okay, I may be lost at this moment, but I know where I am in this Sarah model. And basically the model is S stands for shock. It could be sadness, it could be other things, but typically when we're first experiencing an event, it's numb or shock that had occurred. A typically is anger. And again, this can be various different words. You can put your own word in there, like anguish or other things, but anger, like how could that happen in my life? R stands for resistance. So you can start layering on Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief as well. But R is like resistance, like how could that happen? And it hasn't happened. Like I had a client who, her husband committed suicide. So for a period of time, to help her, she just believed that he was off on a business trip for a while. It was just helpful for her to just not get sucked into it and just believe, even if it was for a couple days, that he was just off on a business trip. So, excuse me, that's another version of resistance. Or, excuse me, head cold. Are also just rock bottom, like you just hit your rock bottom. So I love it when other people put other words on the Sarah model. And then another A, as you're starting to come out of it, is that I've accepted that this now is my life right now, that this change has happened. And the H then gets to what you're talking about, Magdalena, is either hope or healing, that I'm at a place now, I'm beyond acceptance, and now I'm stepping into that hope and that healing that I now have. I'm stepping into whatever my new normal is for me. For example, what do holidays look like when I no longer have this person in my life due to the death or passing or due to a loss of a relationship? What does that look like for me? So that's another helpful thing to think about. Where am I in my various different emotions? Shock, anger, resistance, rock bottom, acceptance, hope, or healing. You may just be dancing through Sarah.
Wow, that's amazing. Goodness gracious. Yeah, I love that you have the acronyms that helps make us remember. And I think for me, another S would be surrender, like surrender to it. I didn't want to cry. I wanted to be numb. I thought crying was for babies or whatever, these things we tell ourselves, and didn't surrender for a really, 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 really long time. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. And to your point too, is The Healthy Grief is a thick book. It's a textbook. So this is not one of those where you would go like, hey, you just have a grief here, all of a sudden read this. And I tend to tell people, open up, the 2/3 of it are the stories, open it up and find a story that you might think might be helpful for that person. But to back up from there, it does have acronyms in it, like the Sarah model, like the Healthy Grief model. It has the stories and the frameworks that are in there. And in other words, it is intended for somebody not to just sit down and read it front to back, but to find those pieces that are going to help them depending upon where they are in the moment. And easy and simple frameworks are what the book is all about.
Yeah. Because when you can't see the forest for the trees and you're feeling overwhelmed and lost, all the things that you said, it's nice to keep it simple.
Yes. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, you've covered 2, right? And you have one more?
I've covered 2. So thinking about relate, that I use the Sarah model. Here is another model that actually comes from the business world that I think about. And it's a simple model. It's based upon William Bridger's change model. And it is simple enough, again, thinking about simple things, is when we first experience an event. So when what once was is no longer, whether it's the passing of a loved one, a change of a relationship, a retirement, whatever that event is, it is the ending of something that we once knew, an ending. And there's a 3 phase to it. There's the ending, there's the middle, and there's the new. So ending, middle, and new. And the new being, I have my new normals. I know what's going to happen for holidays, for example, or what my typical daily schedule looks like. Like I've created my new routine now after the ending of something I once knew. But in the middle of that, it also talks about different ways that we may experience those 3 phases of that change. So, for example, when something ends, we may find ourselves in a situation where we're constantly talking about that. Like when I went through my divorce, that seemed to be the main thing of conversation, right? The loss of, here's what we used to do. We always used to go on road trips. So I'm talking about the past because I'm still stuck in the past of what once was. In the middle is acknowledging and accepting the fact that we're going to have a decrease in productivity. And in other words, we may not be as most effective at work or as a parent. Like just acknowledging and giving ourselves grace that we're not going to be 100% on point. So our productivity drops, and things like anxiety and other heightened emotions may come of it. So just acknowledging in the middle, as we're in the middle of not completely letting go of what once was, and we're still not quite sure what this new is, that we're having a feeling of just lower productivity and possibly higher anxiety in this model. And then as we're moving towards the new, we're knowing we're in that new stage or that new model when we're not emotionally stuck in the past, when we can actually talk about, like, here's what I'm doing for the holidays, or this is what my schedule looks like, or hey, I'm going on a new trip next month. Let's talk about it. Or before I was like, well, my ex and I used to go on this trip and we used to do that. So the phases of it is another way to think about and also know what it looks like when we've grieved. Like another question that's typically asked is, how do I know when I love these questions. How do I know when I've grieved enough? Or how do I know when I've healthily grieved? Or how do I know when I'm through the process of grief and on the other side of it? So this is one model to help with that question. So what does it look like to really step into the new normal? Another way I like to describe it is with social media. If you find that you are bumping upon certain posts by people, like they've just lost a pet or lost a loved one or getting married or celebrating the birth of a baby, anything that relates to your own grief, and when you can honestly and authentically celebrate with them, then you know you are in that new normal, that you are healthfully through that process. Sarah, you are in that healing and hope stage when you can authentically say, congratulations, Magdalena, on your new, whatever it is, without getting stuck into this, well, I don't have that. I don't have that relationship anymore. I don't have that anymore. And you're not able to authentically do it because you're still grieving the loss of that similar experience.
That's so cool. It's amazing how this is in alignment because I'm starting this suicide prevention and awareness and this nonprofit. And like I spent the last 2 months crying a ton because I was purging more grief. I think you'll appreciate that. And like literally just, 2 weeks ago now, when I hear people's stories about their losses, before I think I was still like a little, feeling my own experience still. And now I'm like I can be more of a witness and a space holder. So would you say that that's also kind of like a sign of what you're talking about?
Perfect. And I think witness and space holder is a perfect way to describe it. And there's that point where we can acknowledge that, hey, I've been there too, and I may tear up as I'm sharing that experience with you as an individual. And there's a difference between I'm connecting with you, I'm on that, versus let me get down in your puddle. And it's actually trauma bonding is another term that's used, where we are so much, where I'm still so wounded from my own grief that I am relating to you so much around it, where I'm not helping that other person through their own grief because we're both bringing ourselves down. So yes, I think true, stepping into that space where we are being able to hold space for and be a witness to is knowing that we've healed at that point.
You just made me think of something. I don't know if you would do this ever, but if you ever did a workshop or something for healers, nurses, maybe even people in the funeral home. I feel like there's these industries that attract those of us who are empaths, and we're wounded healers. There's that phrase, like I consider myself a healer of healers. I had to heal my own wounds, and I'm still on the path. I always tell my clients that, but also taking care of myself, on the periphery, so that when I do come in, I'm not like transferring or you said trauma bonding, right? That doesn't help the client, and it can actually make things worse for you and the client simultaneously, right?
Correct. And I knew that when I was going through my divorce, which was 6.5 years ago, that people are saying, hey, Karen, this is great. You should work with those who are going through their own divorce. And I knew at that point in time, I was still operating out of a wound that had not healed. There's a point to where you're completely healed, right? You don't need to be completely healed to help individuals. I think you and I know that. I knew for myself that I needed to be healed enough from my wound that I wasn't bleeding. This is all metaphorical, but I wasn't bleeding all over my clients as they were also sharing with me. And that gets into the trauma bonding. So you're right. There is those of us who are empaths get drawn into this work, which is beautiful. And knowing when we are healthfully enough along that process doesn't mean we're completely healed, but healthfully enough along that process where we're not re-traumatizing ourselves, as well as not being as helpful as we can be for those we want to help and heal and move forward.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, that could be a whole nother conversation. So, well, thank you so much for those three. I have maybe a couple of closing thoughts and one more question for you. What I want to do, and I want you to tell people about your free gift and all of that. But what we're going to do next is just take a quick, brief break for our sponsor, which is a great tool for grief in case anybody's curious. And we'll be right back after this. Healthy and Wealthy and Wise is proudly sponsored by the Soul Vine, your number one go-to source for ayahuasca microdosing. This ayahuasca is legal. It is the Cappy vine. There is no DMT extract or molecule as a part of it, and it can and will transform your life from the inside out. Supporting the Shipibo tribe from South America, this is my go-to source for healing. Learn more at microdosingforhealth.com. All right, well, welcome back. I just want to reiterate for those of you still tuning in to hit the share button. Sharing is caring. And as we head into Suicide Awareness and Recovery Month, I think October is known as International Mental Health Month. And then, oh my gosh, the holidays. I really encourage you all to consider getting Dr. Karen's book as well if you have been impacted by any of the plethora. And I think if you're alive, you've been impacted by several elements of grief, especially since 2020. So I really want to make sure people know how and where to find you, and also what free offering you have for our guests today.
Yes, thank you. So it's easy enough to find me at drkarenkramer.com. drkarenkramer.com. That's DrKarenKramer. That's the easiest way to find me. Now, the website has many different things on that, but I want to draw you to two things that are on there. Towards the top, you're going to find two things. One, if you're interested in booking a call with me, that's going to be in the upper right-hand corner. That's the easiest way to get on my calendar. And right underneath that is going to be a ribbon specifically about healthy grief. And that's going to lead you to more information on the trailer for the book. I have one of the stories that's in there. She is on the video, so you get to hear a bit about her story, which actually she's the one I mentioned who actually was carrying the grief about not able to save her husband who had committed suicide. So that's her story that's in there, that's on there, and then how you can go ahead and purchase that book. So those are two things you're going to find specifically on that website.
Beautiful.
And
go ahead.
The free gift. So I do have that for you as well. And I'm going to send that link because there is a bit.ly link that's for you. So she'll go ahead and put that in there. But I'm just going to quickly read it because I'm looking over at my other one. I actually change this every once in a while. So if you go in like in the next month or two, it may be something different. But I actually send you over a week period of time various different things. Like right now I have a download an ebook on setting goals, another one that is on health, so a visualization, because one of the work I do as a hypnotherapist is I love creating meditations. So you get a download on that. There is one on the 5 steps to managing loss. That's a brief outline from Healthy Grief. And then there's an opportunity to get on a call with me as well if you want to talk more about your body and health, because one of the things I do in Healthy Grief is talking about how unprocessed and unresolved grief will settle in the body. So if you're interested about various different aches and pains and what might be underneath that, then that's where you have an opportunity to do an assessment with me.
Yay. Wow. So generous. Yes, as she said, everyone watching this, whenever down the road, months from now, years from now, the link will be there and something that you can take advantage of. Thank you so much for your generosity. And I have one more question before I let you go. I do want to make some quick announcements. And actually, Dr. Karen, I'm going to talk about this afterwards with you, hoping that maybe if it works in your schedule, if you can make it, it'd be an honor to have my guests meet you in person at our September 21st Suicide Awareness Kickoff. We are forming our nonprofit/church to bring hope and healing, break the stigma, have open conversations about suicide and addiction. September is, as I've said, is both Suicide Awareness and Addiction Recovery Month, which I didn't even know until last week, which I'm like, wow, this is incredible synchronicity, because we are really wanting to serve up to 100 people in the next 12 months through me and my husband, possibly even Dr. Karen's, just having a whole network of people and scholarships to serve and hold people through their grief, through their trauma after losing a loved one to suicide or addiction, which I know firsthand too many times, and how much it really, really, really impacted my life and the lives of our clients. We've seen it. Generational trauma passes on, like you were talking about, through the body if it's not processed. Those abandonment wounds, those loss, rejection wounds, whatever you want to label them as, they stay inside of your DNA and pass on to your children. So you can break generational cycles by working with someone like Dr. Karen or supporting our nonprofit. So if you want to check out the events, we're going to be live streaming it on the 21st. If you can't attend in person, go to magdalenagrace.com. That's where you'll find out the live stream, as well as the Lotus Throne, Lotus Throne Sanctuary.org. If you would like to make a donation, if you'd like to support one of our events, we're having one in September and one in November for the Day of the Dead weekend. So really just bringing forward these conversations, because there's a lot of stigma. I mean, I'm sure you could talk another hour about this. Most people don't want to talk about their grief. Most people don't want to even acknowledge it, right? Because we live in a society that's still very patriarchal and a stiff upper lip, and never let them see you sweat. And we want to break that. We want to let that shit go, as they say, and really link arms with good people and help heal 100 people in the next 12 months. So if this resonates with you, listeners, even if it's beyond September, we'll be doing these events every May and September in honor of Mental Health Month, which is May. And then, of course, you already know what September represents for all of us. So those are my final reminders, announcements. And Dr. Karen, I have one final question for you that I ask of all of my guests. And my show name is Healthy and Wealthy and Wise, 4 years strong. And to me, it's changed a little bit. It's evolved what the phrase healthy and wealthy and wise means. But I always like to ask my guests, when you hear that phrase, healthy and wealthy and wise, Dr. Karen, what does it mean for you?
I'm leaning into this one energetically, and what comes up for me is curiosity. So then logical mind says, for what purpose curiosity? And I'm going to say it is more about how can I be more healthy, wealthy, and wise.
Wonderful. Yay. I love it. I love hearing everyone's definition. So thank you for your contribution today. I know there's going to be a lot of value, and this show is probably one people won't want to listen to multiple times. And maybe I'll have you back around the holidays or in the new year. Dr. Karen, I really appreciate you. So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, and all my friends, I wish you the best health, the best wealth, and the best wisdom. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Please subscribe, download, leave a 5-star rating or review, and also please refer this to a friend you know who may benefit from this inspirational message. We hope to see you again. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel or join my Facebook community. And if you are looking to manifest your best health, your best wealth by trusting your best wisdom within, please go to my website, www.microdosingforhealth.com. Again, www.microdosingforhealth.com. to quiet your mind, get into your heart, heal your body, and manifest your best health and your best wealth.